Boom. All right. It is. What is today? It is 20. Yep. October 27th. You know, believe it or not, Rashid, we started this thing on October 25th, 2016. Do you remember that?
I did remember the date. As a matter of fact, I think, well, it couldn't have been last week, but the week before, I was talking to somebody about that date was coming up soon, but I didn't remember exactly. I just remember it was right before the election.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
Right before Trump got elected.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
You were a very different person back then.
Yeah, that's true. And I suspect. Thank you for tuning in to the #1 show in the world of comprehensive barbershop talk, beer, and the conversation. I'm here with my brother Rashid Muhammad and special guest Phoenix Moon. How you doing?
Halito, I'm well. How are you?
Good. Do you want to say your full name and your tribal?
Yes, I'm Phoenix Moon. I am a Paw Monkey Chickahominy woman. I'm 48 years old. I'm a Republican from New York City.
Yeah. Now,
New York City Republican, boy.
Yeah. So when did you
Rough
switch
life.
over? Yeah, it is.
During the Obama administration, I lost tons of money and saw a lot of babies that look like my son getting shot repeatedly. I could go on, but in a nutshell, that second term, I immediately changed my party. My son registered for the Selective Service at the same time, and he indicated to me that he was going to register as a Republican also. And I knew at that time it was a conversation with my child as well that convinced me I was better off.
Okay, so what was the driving force outside of your son and the loss of money?
Well, there was the historical aspect of it. Again, being American Indian, the Whig Party to the Republican Party, and it was actually the Know Nothing Party who ended up being what we now know as the Democrat Party that actually kind of inserted themselves into our nativity. They were also the Native American Party, and then historically, it's egregious to my whole well-being here.
Oh, okay. Yeah. All right. Okay, cool. So what is, I think that we talked briefly about one of the things that was really a big deal to you was Border Patrol. And obviously, if you want to elaborate a little bit on the size of your tribe and what drove that would also be good.
Well, I'm in the process of federal enrollment. Our tribes just actually got recognized within the last 5 years, and they just now opened their rolls, and I actually have the blessings from the family, and there's several of us that have to enroll, but I am a direct descendant of Opachancano, Pocahontas, Queen Anne West, and several other different tribes. I live here in California, and again, historically, the border has always been a problem. I do come from New York by way of Virginia, and even with the 13 colonies, this portion, which they called New Spain, where I live now in California, has always been a connection with foreigners coming into the land unlawfully. It's always been an issue, and I noticed some of these nuances historically. And of course, how, I'm not saying it's because they're taking any jobs or any of those racist statements. I'm saying because these people commit crimes, and we have no way of identifying them. And then they simply get sent home. A lot of people just simply get sent back after they've already done something to a U.S. citizen. So we don't get any justice in that aspect. And then there's, of course, cutting the corners and not going through the actual application process that you need to in order to, obtain the benefits that are available for United States citizens. I don't think that anybody should be able to cut any corners, especially when they don't take care of the people that they blatantly oppress, that are blatantly oppressed here anyway.
Oddly enough, there is an RNC that was recently built in Swanee, and it is comprised of the Latino community, and that's one of their main complaints. A lot of them have gone conservative because of border control. Their They obviously, a lot of them are Catholic. They don't believe in contraceptives and contraceptives, birth control, and abortions. And they're heavy entrepreneurial. So a lot of them have gone that way. But one of their chief complaints has been Border Patrol as well, because they went through the proper channels to get their immigration status. So, I mean, that's one of the things that I'm hearing a lot, in fact, so, and, I think I did a live about that, kind of addressing some of that a little bit earlier. But I'm sorry, Rashid, go ahead, man. I don't want to, I'm sure you. Okay, so let me ask you this. What do you think when you start looking at the this Border Patrol issue and the current administration? What's the climate out there in California? Do you see it shifting any? Do you see a shift towards the Republican Party, or is it looking like it's going to stay heavy Democratic?
It looks completely saturated Democratic. I live near Fallbrook, which is, Republican territory, city of Temecula, Republican territory. But outside of that, like Los Angeles and other areas are totally saturated blue. California is always important, especially with presidential elections. They have, I think, like 55 delegates or something like that. And of course, being at the advantage with the last polling stations because of the time zone. There's some things that you can get done. Initially, when I moved here, I think it was probably the last year of Brown. I think the last governor after Schwarzenegger was here, which they couldn't stand him. I didn't move until after Schwarzenegger left. So I came somewhere in between that administration and Newsom. And I'm just now returning again to Newsom. So I haven't really figured out the climate too much, but it is very difficult to live if you're not an immigrant. And I want to stress that, especially as an unrecognized American Indian, they still have a lot of tribes here that are federally recognized that struggle. And they don't have the same problems as maybe some of their other family members on the other side of the border, simply because of their existence on this side of the border. But the sex trafficking, the missing women and children here, they have to do something. There's criminals from all over the world that come through Mexico, unfortunately. And that puts us at a great security risk. For all sorts of things. And, again, people don't really have a lot of consequences because they just ship them back to their nation.
Do you see a solution in sight?
If they would have finished that wall, if they could have finished Trump's wall, I think it was worth it, And then what they're doing now isn't fair, the treatment of the people at the borders. And now there's also the Ukrainians. So it's not just people from the Latin countries. These are people globally inserting themselves in a narrative. You know what I'm saying? Not enough is done. I don't see this administration doing anything about it. I remember Kamala indicated that she was at the borders and she was not at the borders. And the governor actually dropped I think maybe 2 busloads of people in front of her house. So yeah, I don't see this administration doing anything about it.
Oh, but go ahead. Yeah.
Didn't AOC go to the border? That was kind of a joke. Yeah, have you seen that picture of her crying at the border? Nobody's seen the picture of AOC crying at the border.
No, right, there's a delayed reaction. I got it.
Well, there's actually a science to this, and what it is that if they can, especially in Georgia right now, one of the things that Stacey Abrams is part of our platform is changing the voter ID laws, right? And what she says is because they're racist. And so everybody runs to the exception to the rule. Oh, I have a grandmother that lives in the rural parts of Mississippi, and they can't get to, how could I say it, to a DDS or place to get a driver's license because they don't have transportation. And so them not being able to vote, being able to vote is racist in nature. And what they're really doing, and what they don't tell people, is that they're actually getting, by removing the voter ID laws, they're in a position to where they can get illegals to vote. And so that's much more damaging. And the reason why it is because our numbers are falling. And if you compound, like I said, you can change a quotient two ways, right? You can do one or two things. You can either reduce the numerator and keep the denominator the same, numerator being black people and then the denominator being everyone else in America, or you can keep the numerator the same and expand the denominator. And what they're actually doing is finding a way to do both at the same time. With abortion, 66% of all babies aborted thus far this year have been black. So you're reducing our numbers, you're reducing the numerator, and when you let people in, you're expanding the denominator. And the reason why that's a bad idea is because the less representation you have, the less say you have, and therefore the less politicians have a need to, because this is why black men have by and large begun to switch over, because they're not catering to us. They don't feel like we're a legit voting bloc. And now they're missing us because we've gone over a lot with the Hispanics, and now, of course, the Native Americans. I know Filipino Americans, Asians, that are established, I should say, that have switched over. And some of the chaos just associated with some of the policies and whatnot have driven people so far because they have just gone so far with it. Right? And so what they've actually done is they've created the undoing for themselves at this point. Or will you disagree with that?
Excuse me. Sorry, I got a little bronchitis here. It might be contagious. I don't know, man. I think that to the extent that there has been a big demographic shift, and I don't know how big it's been. I think in absolute numbers, it's fairly big. From a percentage standpoint, maybe not so much. But to the extent that you're seeing more non-white people go over to the Republican Party, I think it is one, part of the botched calculus of Democrats. Because again, you talked about like illegal immigrants and getting illegal immigrants to vote. Number one, I think Stacey Abrams has kind of killed that whole anti-voter ID thing because they started polling it, and most people just were not buying that bullshit. So her and Warnock,
still on our platform.
They were talking all that Jim Crow 2.0 stuff, and if you just watched, if you looked at their messaging, they have stopped it, and they stopped it because a poll came out that showed like 70% of Americans were like, "There's nothing wrong with showing an ID to vote." But I think on the other side, the question about getting illegal immigrants to vote. I don't know if their votes would necessarily. Again, that's Democrat calculus that like, an illegal immigrant, if they could vote, then they're going to vote for a Democrat. I don't know if that's necessarily true for the reasons that you've already outlined.
You think so? Because Republicans want to close the border, so you don't think they're going to vote for the people that's letting them come in and stay in?
Do I think a person who
is actually... Vote for the people that's letting them just, run willy-nilly.
Do I think that a person who has made it across the border gives a damn about other people coming behind them? Not really. And again, like the whole question of like mass deportation, it's possible, but it's unlikely regardless of who's in charge. Who's the last person to give mass amnesty to illegal immigrants? 2 seconds, go.
Shit, I don't know.
Ronald Reagan.
Look at that little history
lesson.
That's what I got. Okay. Well, I still think that more than likely they're going to come in and they're going to vote Democratic. And
maybe.
You're right. You never can tell how a person is going to vote, but I don't know if if they watch any liberal media at all, it has a way of controlling people. It has a way of turning.
You tell me that people that are coming over here for economic reasons that need a good American economy in order to thrive are going to vote for the party that is destroying the economy? I don't know. They might be desperate. I don't know if they're stupid.
Well, they're not going to deport them.
Well, I'm just saying. But that's the whole thing, though. Is if you remember, around the financial crisis, there was this whole self-deportation thing. like immigration became less of an issue because the economy was so bad. These people self-deported. They're here for opportunity. If the opportunity ain't here, they'll go back home.
To where?
To where they came from.
But okay, all right.
I mean, that's what happened. I mean, that is the thing that happened.
I don't think the people that are swimming past sharks to get here are gonna just turn right back around. I don't think they'll do that.
All I'm saying is that they did do that around the time of when our economy was in the crapper. Mass self-deportation. Just look it up. Mass self-deportation was a thing.
Well,
now,
they
were
left.
these
They
the
left.
people that were swimming past sharks? Maybe not. Maybe they were people who overstayed a visa or whatever.
Well, yeah, I mean, shoot, if they racked up 40, 50,000, they can go back to Mexico and have a kingdom built. If they left with a bag. They didn't leave with, and they might.
That's the whole point. Most of them don't. Look, contrary to popular belief, most Mexicans that come over here don't want to stay here. Most of them come over here, they work and they send money back to Mexico.
Right.
It is just so I think the real problem is just that our just ability to create work visas and that sort of stuff is real messed up. You have all this illegal immigration. I think that to the point that was made earlier about the fact that there's no like accounting for them and that sort of stuff, that could be solved via an actual rational, reasonable, effective policy for granting people visas. And again, giving a person a visa is not giving them citizenship, but it does allow them to be accounted for, and it does allow for their taxes to be paid to go towards some of these services that they're using.
Do you think it drives down labor costs?
In some places, it probably does. Yeah.
Okay. Right. I mean, because this is a capitalistic country.
Yeah, but that's a double-edged sword.
Stacey Abrams.
Not yet.
That's a double-edged sword because, on one hand, so yes, it can drive down, particularly at the lowest parts of the wage ladder, having a lot of cheap, unskilled labor come across the border, being wanting to work for lower prices because they have a lower threshold for comfort, does drive down prices on the bottom end, or labor wages on the bottom end. I guess the question is this: like, when are we going to start working on getting ourselves out of the bottom end, as opposed to worrying about the people that are on the bottom end, worrying about people that are taking our place on the bottom end? Like, I feel like that's where the conversation and the work needs to be around raising folks up so they're not so vulnerable to people that have come over here and work for damn near nothing.
Well, I mean, I agree with that, but if the Dems stay in power, government regulations will put the entrepreneurs out of business alone. I mean, and so, I mean, look who's running for governor.
Who's running? Stacey Abrams?
That's a Marxist.
Well, I don't know. I mean, she's definitely a progressive, and I'm definitely not a huge fan of most of her policies. But I think that if the economy tanks, the immigration problem takes care of itself. Again, an immigration problem like we have is actually what you want to have. Because we are a prosperous country, and people are coming because they want to share in that prosperity. When people stop to want to come over here, we got a real problem. And I do believe that the Democrats are more likely to create that type of America than the Republicans are, though I ain't a fan of Republicans either.
Sure. Okay. What do you think, Phoenix? Any comments on that, or you want me to move to the Civil Rights Act?
I think he kind of, nailed it. I can agree with most of what he said. I just don't but I will just say I don't have a lot of faith that the Republican Party is going to do as well as I would like them to. I do see that changing now. I think that's going to change, especially with the younger voters. I think they need more time. A lot of people are considering crossing parties, but again, it also has a lot to do with their family and the persuasion, especially after the pandemic, where some people were actually either, if they weren't completely separated, the families were absolutely brought together. Hopefully they weren't absorbing too much CNN or too much of the liberal news, but if they've had really solid discussions, about the future of their families, so the generations going forward, then I'm pretty sure that people are considering a complete partyship. But I think it needs to be on a family level, not just an individual level, in order for it to make sense, especially, in the people's local communities, in order for it to see the best possible changes.
Well, let me ask you this. Well, you know what? To your point about family, Lord, JoJo, I think I'm ready now for that 1 minute clip. It's just from the 8 to 9 minute marker. I'll talk until you tell me it's good to go. It's, huh? It's good to go? I want y'all to check this out real quick.
I'm always reminded of that one black young man who went with his mom and sister to go.
Hey guys, welcome to Forward. We're a new type of doctor's office that's providing preventative primary care. We got world-class doctors supported by the most
Vote,
Yeah.
and he told his mama that he didn't vote for Biden.
I told you to do Biden. Y'all didn't lost the damn vote. We didn't lost the vote. That's don't go to Trump. God damn. Ain't nobody worshiping them. But God damn it, Chris. We need somebody to know what motherfucking sense. Team vote independent. Honey, I told you. I said go Democrat, Biden. Now there's a vote that we done lost that go to Trump. This is why I don't do politics. I will never do this again. He said he ain't gonna vote again.
Well, that's how black men are expected to be.
Okay. All right, Phoenix. Did you hear or see that?
I got to see it, but the sound kept going out. I know the mother was just not happy with her son voting for Biden. I got that much I did get.
Not happy is an understatement. I mean, is that an appropriate way to raise your children?
Absolutely not. The body language, again, I couldn't.
Is that the
hear
appropriate way to
audio.
treat anybody, even somebody you don't like?
No.
Okay. All right.
No, but I can tell you, I lost lifelong friends over Trump and Fauci. You know, the vaccine and Donald Trump, people decided that how they felt emotionally connected to things was more important than, the moral code, I can just go on, but I took losses. I took losses defending truth. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, I have, we're going to do a homophobia show where for the first time ever, we're going to have gay men in here. And I had a...
Sure, it's the first thing.
Well, you don't ever know, I guess. But this where it's going to be a straight up discussion about it between straight and gay men. And one of the things I tell people, I do have a gay friend who actually lives in California. Now, when I met him, I didn't know he was gay, and but I got cool with him, and then he told me 4 years down the road, and I had already kind of established a relationship with him. Here's the deal: if somebody can stop being your friend because of a personal choice that you make, they're not your friend. And so they may have done you a favor. Now, that's my personal opinion,
Right.
and so, I've said this in a post, how can iron sharpen iron if we all see the world the same way? Me and Rashid make for a great mix because, well, sometimes we see eye to eye, sometimes we don't.
Right.
And so, I don't know. So, but yeah, there's a lot of that going on, and people get upset about it, and they don't realize that, to Rashid's point, that we're all in control of our own lives. I think that politics is really just a good push off of the wall if you're a swimmer, right? Yeah. You can get some things foundationally done in terms of some legislation. And black men in general, and of course Native Americans or indigenous American Indians, yes, need equal protection under the law. So let's roll into the Civil Rights Act of 1968, signed by Lyndon B. Johnson. Do you want to go ahead and kick it off and expound on that and tell us exactly what that was designed to do?
Yes, this is at a time where Negro and Indian in America are interchangeable, right? The 1968 Martin Luther King, everybody knows about the movement, Rosa Parks, Jesse Jackson, Bayard Rustin, all of these different people. but they never read the law. I've asked civil rights attorneys for the better part of the last 20 years if they ever read the actual Civil Rights Act. And when you hear no, that they haven't, it kind of makes you wonder how have they been helping Black people win. And when you look at the statistics, according to the EEOC, there's like a 99% failure rate on civil rights cases. And I presume that it's generally because people don't know that it's rights of Indians. So most of the people that are called Black, Negro, that were here in antiquity, I'm talking Revolutionary War, the King Philip Wars during the 1700s, early days, pre-United States, they are the American Indians. They're descendants of the actual American Negro that was here when everybody else came. So rights of Indians was established. This is what the promise was 100 years later. The only difference, the only thing that happened during this time that Malcolm X mentioned before he passed away, Martin Luther King, 100 years later or 100 years ago, even Lyndon B. Johnson, was the Indian treaties and the Freedmen's Act. In which case there were U.S. Indians, and then there were the tribal Indians that descend from the 5 civilized tribes. What happened to the rest of the people? Years later, in the 1960s, those descendants, they were able to establish themselves politically with connections, legislative acts that occurred in Atlanta. Martin Luther King, I have some clips I probably should have sent to you with him expressing that they had people in New York and also in Atlanta that were working in their best interest to get this bill passed. Of course, he died, and then within a week later, after him passing away, posthumously, Public Law 90284 is expressed. Now, in the beginning sections of these titles, they speak about the riots that occurred, and you know that who was rioting. That identifies the American Negro. Those were the people that we know were rioting in Detroit, in Watts, and Compton, and Baton Rouge, and all New York, and Baltimore, and DC, and all of these places, as a result of civil rights. The issue with civil rights being passed. Then you have the assassination of Martin Luther King, and you go to the next title where it completely talks about rights of Indians, right? In the first title, it shows how the American Indian, it has all the rights to federally protected activities, habeas corpus, you name it. All the way down into the Fair Housing Act, there are several acts that follow through this through its totality. However, the main thing was rights of Indians. One thing that's unique about the U.S. law is single subject matter. So if I try to create an act or bill to save the manatee, when that bill gets passed or enacted, I can't say, wait, I also want to save the buffalo as well. I would have to start the process all over again. So we know that the single subject matter also refers to the American Indian, or if you actually look in the video, you see Lyndon B. Johnson actually says the word Negro out of his mouth.
Right.
Negro and Indian are interchangeable.
So what allowed for Negro and Indian to be interchangeable?
Well, it started in the 1600s. They, under the King James Charter, that's the earliest documentation that I have. In 1625, King James, the Indians, Negroes, Moors, and Turks will all be categorized and can be enslaved. And they never corrected that. Then in the 1705, they made a law saying that it was unlawful and also illegal to enslave Indians, but they never changed the classifications back. So anybody here in America, again, with these last names, these unique last names, they're not slave last names, they're actually company names of our people trying to engage in commerce as they, established the United States. So they misclassified people, and that's everybody. It's irrespective of whether or not you're a so-called Black individual. They did it to white people too. In 1790, your folks on land, they were free. They were considered white. In 1810, they may have called you white again. By 1840, they're now calling you colored. Then they're calling you mulatto. By the 1900s, they're calling you Negro. The 1930s, they're calling you Black. The 1980s, 1990s, they're calling you African American. So our status here has changed repeatedly. My people in particular were, it's on congressional record. If you've ever heard of Walter Plecker, Marcus Garvey is actually not a hero of mine. He worked directly with the man that targeted all of our families in Virginia and basically threatened them with the Racial Integrity Act was passed and threatened them not to list their ethnicity as American Indian. There was only 2 races in Virginia, and that was going to be black or white.
Really?
And no in between, yes. And they actually caught him, and it's on congressional record. He was able to do this from 1912 all the way up until 1946. So he had a very long career of threatening midwives. He was the registrar of vital statistics.
Oh, boy.
So, yeah, there was a lot of stuff. Marriage records, all of those things were changed and tainted. Marcus Garvey was he worked directly with the same individual, this white supremacist who was also a eugenicist. So there's a lot of different details. Somebody else's hero is another one's villain.
Well, I actually had heard that Marcus Garvey worked with the white supremacists, but it was for the purpose of negotiating the Back to Africa movement. Hey, you guys don't want us here, we don't want to be here, help us get back. That's my limited understanding of the rationale for the dialogue and even the meeting. So I don't know how true any of that is, but I'm sure, like you say, there must have been some sort of, if that is true, there probably was something that they wanted him to do, in exchange for that. Okay.
It was actually he worked vicariously through the American Colonization Society. They had been sending the American Negro to establish the land in Africa. Liberia is a republic that was created by the American Negro.
Correct.
They started sending them as early as 1816. And the people of Sierra Leone also comprised of people that had to leave and, go to Great Britain after the Revolutionary War. They chose the wrong side. Britain lost. They then became British subjects. And when they were exiled out of the United States, they had to take those people with them. So their primary residence for the last couple of hundred years has been Sierra Leone, but they started off here in the Americas. Marcus Garvey, the American Colonization Society was open from 1816 all the way until 1964. So they already had a free trip to Africa. Anybody that wanted to go had a free trip to Africa from 1816 to 1964, when the American Negro had the right to vote. That other Civil Rights Act got passed, and this is where things changed in that manner.
All right, would you have gone to Africa?
Absolutely not. I do know a lot of tribes from Virginia, actual Indian tribes that did get up and leave en masse, different families, the Day family. You can find them in antiquity and free people of color records as early as the 1600s. And I don't know why, what compelled them. Some people had no choice. Either they had 30 days to move themselves and their family or risk being sold or enslaved. They were threatened, all different sorts of things. And that was actually a voluntary thing for most of them. They died within 5 years because they weren't from there. And they indicate that in the Declaration of Independence for Liberia in 1847. We, the people of Liberia, are original inhabitants of North America. And then it talks about how they, were ousted politically. They couldn't have any say in their own country. What they thought, there's a lot of text and documentation where white people indicated that they would purchase land, they would consider freeing the slaves, but as long as they moved out of their own country. We're going to take over here, we're going to run things here, and why don't you go over there where there's people that kind of look like you. So.
Dang. Steve.
That's all on congressional record. Abraham Lincoln had no interest in freeing anyone.
Right.
He also wanted to send people out of the country as well.
Right. Well, I know he wanted to say, Abraham Lincoln wanted to save the Union. And so this has been, there's been, the inception of this country is built on lies, greed, selfishness, and most importantly, because I work in politics now, power.
Right.
This is greater than any drug. Right. And there's nothing more fulfilling than power. And I have seen some pretty cutthroat things, so I do know that to be true. And oddly enough, what's interesting about it is that some politicians who I've come across, none that I work for directly, but some politicians I've come across don't even know anything about the history in politics. They were just, yeah, and so, yeah, I mean, it's, but then again, that creates a niche for people like me. So, yeah, all right, so let's get into the other thing. The influence of Malachi York and what role he played in either, would you say, the dilution or the lost, or basically a loss of rights? How was he involved in that?
Well, I won't say a loss of rights. I would definitely say a connection to the land. It didn't necessarily start with him, but he definitely played a major role in from the 90s, at least the 90s up until the 2000s when he was actually stopped. And people had kind of funded their own oppression. They made him a very wealthy man. He purchased those acres in Georgia.
Putnam County.
And lots of, excuse me?
Well, yeah. Eastman, Georgia, Putnam County.
Yeah. And while he was doing that, you had other people pretending to be American Indian. So he's creating another race, another ethnicity, right? He's talking about the 13th planet, making up different languages. People hate the country. They don't like the government. They fail to participate. There's no civic engagement whatsoever now, right? People are completely disconnected. They're looking for sovereignty and all of these things that are egregious to the United States, right? So now that they're completely disconnected at a critical time where all of the elements of their political power is supposed to be the elements that catapult them forward, and now everybody's like like still on the milk when they're supposed to be chewing meat at this point. You know what I'm saying? Especially if they're looking for things to change. At this point, I think they dumbed a lot of people down. They've made people belligerently prejudiced and biased, right? And I won't say racist, because to me, racist is not a bad word. Capitalism is not a bad word. If I like to knit stockings and sell them out of the trunk of my car, I love being able to have the freedom to do so. So I don't look at capitalism as such a terrible thing, right? Especially if it's not being used for malevolent reasons. And the same thing with racism. I think me and my sisters are beautiful. I think we all have good genes. All of us are in our mid-50s, and there's, my father's got some strong daughters. That's racism. My brothers still good athletes. They're very intelligent. I don't think there's anything wrong with me loving my family. It doesn't mean that loving and protecting and providing and looking to see my people build into the next 7 generations does not disqualify anybody else from doing the same. So I don't look at those words the same. But Malachi York, the Elijah Muhammad, all of these different entities took people's mind off of the land, and it made them hate the country. Then there's no accountability. I could go on. There's no accountability from some of these elders. A lot of that happened prior to me even being on this planet. And, just going back into the history, Angela Davis, the People's Temple with Jim Jones, just the endorsements. This Civil Rights Act was passed, and in less than 90 days, people forgot that they had American Indian roots. And it's so funny how so many Black Americans heard that they had Indian in their family. It was actually a joke to them, not knowing that Grandma and Grandpa didn't lie about a thing, and all these other people that looked like us did, right? We know that, and that gave McGraw-Hill and Rand McNally and all of these people that were in charge of our textbooks to basically essentially destroy our psyche and tell us we had no say in the matter in this country. We had nothing to do with building it except free slave labor. We were swinging from vines from somewhere else and then brought to this nation to work for free. That was the narrative that, was completely obscene and it was obnoxious to tell people that lie. And now, all of these years later, you have these blanket stories, and people don't actually know how to insert themselves in history. So when I see Black people saying, well, when are they going to create anti-hate black people, right? And I'm sitting there like, they're telling you, if you ever look at any form that says what your race is, that you have to, they're asking you your race. It's very simple what it says. It identifies the people there. American Indian, a person whose origins are of the original peoples of the America. Same thing with like Asian, and it names the different countries that would be included in that. When it says Black/African American, it says a person whose origins are of one of the Black racial groups of Africa.
Okay. No, and you are right about that. I'm curious about this. When we start talking about the Nation of Islam and Elijah Muhammad and who I think is the GOAT, El Hajj Malik Shabazz himself, that's me, you know. Do you think that they were right a little bit when it came to they didn't want cultural intrusion? I mean, let's just look at the feminist movement for a second. I mean, what do you think? I mean, I definitely disagree with the idea of hating the country, but I've always thought that we are a nation within a nation. So how do you? I mean, you may say it's racist. I'm just saying that everybody has the right to preserve their culture, and if you want to go outside of that and love who you love, you can love who you love. But how do you feel? Rashid can even lend a lot of credence to that about the fear of the assimilation and cultural influence with regard to the movements of the Nation of Islam.
Well, I could say what my grievances are with them. Elijah Muhammad faked a Middle Eastern accent, right? And they thought that they were going to be treated better in this country if they faked being from somewhere else. He took my grandma's bean pie recipe, right? Yeah. That's indigenous to the American Indian culture, the American Negro culture, and he took it to the Middle East, right? He faked a Middle Eastern accent. That man is from Georgia. He faked a Middle Eastern accent and gave a completely different spirituality system. Now, for some people that were on drinking or on drugs, or if that made them a better person and they cleaned up, so be it. I don't have any qualms about that. But in the instance of the culture vulture, I can tell how it injured me, how it disconnected me from the land, and looking at my family that's actually giving me the history in my face in real time, the side eye. God would walk out my door, saw God bodies and nations of earth and Israelites, and it was always trying to fight for my own identity while I watched everybody else give away our stuff. And then these same skin folk turned around and said that we don't have any culture, after they gave away everything that was unique and different to the American Negro. So that was my problem with a lot of those leaders. C. Vernon Mason, Al Sharpton, David Jenkins trying to sell us they're worth almost $20 million brownstones back in '92. We were fresh out of high school. We were young and ambitious, ready for college, and we were ready to be financially secure during the middle of a crack era. We had no certainty of how things were going to shake out at that time. They told us, they would give us the runaround and tell us that we couldn't qualify because the Jews were buying up all of the property and this, that, and the third. And that didn't happen. It wasn't the Jews, it was actually them. And then I realized that we were donating money to the National Action Network, and we're paying off his debt for the lie he told about Tawana Brawley. Right? So a lot of these people that they said that they were leaders, they actually kind of set us back and, kind of then put these other Democratic candidates in front of us and say, this guy here, he's going to help us. Right? And they always give people of color a ceiling. Right? They always give them a limit of how far they can go. And they've been preaching poverty. They've been preaching nothingness for so long that people they forgot that they come from winning stock.
Right. Yeah. So now you're right. How do you feel about Candace Owens and what she's doing with the best, the greatest lie ever told? Is that?
Candace Owens, even a broke clock is right 2 times a day, right? We stand for a lot of the same things, especially with the Pope family thing. And that's another thing, right? They made it very, very easy for me to be a murderer, right? Cold thing for God-fearing people to become a murderer. This is why I let my children know that there will be killers in heaven, but there may not be a place for a murderer. And what I mean by that is I calculated a day that I was going to go into a Planned Parenthood and abort a baby, right? Just the way that it was so easy for me to do that. There was no counseling. There was none of that. And the regret, they never tell you that you're going to have postpartum depression. They never indicate any of these other lingering effects from abortion, right? And then flash forward, I'm a child. My mother's 11 out of 18 children. I have 97 first cousins. I know what Sharon's all about. 2 at the foot, 2 at the head, a whole bunch of us in the one room. And that's the life that I come from, chores and teamwork, making the dream work. So at some point I was under the impression that if I had another child, I wasn't going to be valid, right? That was going to slow down my career. That was going to slow down all of these fictitious things that I thought, would happen, right? And it made me a coward. And then flash forward years later when you realize that you still had enough love for family to take care of another child, 2 more children, right? And not only that, you saw the image that was presented when I saw Trayvon Martin, when I saw Tamir Rice, when I saw Freddie Gay, the image that was portrayed, and I felt like such a hypocrite. How can I cry for the life that's slipping away right in front of our eyes, and I would march myself down and create a day. I would create a day. And I want these people to give me the excuse and make me feel like, hey, it's a woman's body, it's my choice. My choice to be a murderer, and then essentially later on cry and say that they're killing our kids.
Yeah, you're right about that. I said that I like the GOP because it's more of a transactional relationship. Instead of give us our daily bread. Whenever somebody gives you something, there's a receipt coming. There's a bill coming for it later, and you don't know what that bill is going to be. Brother Rashid.
I don't. There's lots to unpack there, and I won't even attempt to unpack it. I'll just say that, I think that, we live in a world where, human beings over the course of our existence on this planet have developed innumerable ways of looking at the world and philosophies on dealing with the world and understandings of what's right and what's wrong. And they're all contextual on environments, whether that is like a natural environment or, an environment of stress in a group of people. They could be at war, they could be, trying to preserve their lives during famine. All these things create ways of thinking and believing. And I think that it's very difficult to know what is right at any particular given point in time for any individual. And I think that, so we fall back on our family, we fall back on traditions, we fall back on things that we're familiar with or things that are accessible to us. And so, just thinking about the whole Nation of Islam thing, obviously I was raised in a Nation of Islam. And I do think that there are counterproductive ideas there just around how one can socialize. You can cut off large portions of knowledge and understanding and relationships by taking that type of belief system too far. It's not the only belief system like that. And arguably any type of, it could be the same for a Christian or a Jewish person or an atheist or whatever. It's possible to take any of these things to extremes. And I think that just the wisdom. Now, one interesting thing that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad did say is that it takes a person 75 years to learn how to live life. And every additional year I'm on this planet, I'm not near 75 now, I'm getting nearer. I realize that, at the end of the day, the real teacher is just getting out there, understanding the world. And I'm going to shut up in a second. to the extent that we have these pre-formulated philosophies, which we can call religions or whatever, spiritual traditions, they can help. But I do think that everybody's on their own journey. No two people believe the same thing, and it's the commitment to that journey and being the best that we can that I think is important. And I think a big part of that is really just trying to get the most out of life, which means getting the most out of other people.
Absolutely. We've got about 3.5 minutes left. Phoenix, is there anything that you want to expound on or you'd like me to expound on?
No, I like the platform. I'm definitely going to share it. I think you guys will do really well on Twitter.
Okay.
This content, I think, if you can bring people from Twitter to this channel, I think it's going to be dope. I hope I get to come back.
Absolutely.
I'll actually be in Atlanta soon, so I'd love to come and sit in the studio with you guys.
Yeah, are you going to wear your traditional outfit?
Yes, I will. I always have my jewelry on too. Sometimes, I'm from New York. People jump out bushes and stuff. If you stay ready, you ain't got to get ready.
Yeah, that's true.
So I don't wear regalia every day, but you can always tell. It's always something, even if it's subtle. They can always tell who I am.
Yeah, well, no, we really appreciate it. We really, really do. And yes, we definitely look forward to having you here in the studio. I would like to say this in closing. This has been a journey for me, this political thing and learning about people and learning how people feel. And I wouldn't trade it in for the world, for nothing. All right, we're going to go ahead and wrap this bad boy up. Brother Rashid Muhammad, it's all as usual. It's always good to have you. East Point, smoke some dank.
Old National got the skanks.